permission to really show up as who we are meant to really be, who God wanted us to be, source, Allah, whoever we decide to pick and choose. And for those of you that don't, does anybody not know Mary Morrissey? I mean, everybody's been so excited. So she really needs no intro because she's so amazing. And all of these women have been following you. But what I would like to say is that we've known each other now about 12, 13 years, because you've been in TLC since the beginning, right?
No, I came in probably 6 years ago. But I mean, Jack and I mean, he came to my church, in the late 80s. I mean, so you guys were working together by then, Patty, I think.
Yeah, in the late 80s. And I think the first experience I had was with your husband at TLC.
With Joe.
And we had to go around and do our autobiographical sharing. And so we all did our intros, and then we had to do it in a very extreme manner. And so I said, oh my God, I'm totally from the Valley. And so now every time I see Mary's husband, he says, totally. Oh my God.
That's funny.
He's such a great guy. So thank you. So what I would love for you to do is
just for a second, just tell me the women that we have the privilege of being with today, in general, what are they in your program for? What's the goal?
So what we're doing is it's a year-long mastermind group, and the goal is to really explore all the different areas in our lives where we haven't really given ourselves permission to show up fully. And you and I have had this conversation where and they all know that I would sit around waiting for Jack to somehow was supposed to show up and say, hey, you should be all these things. And, as I would resent and get passive aggressive and finally having the epiphany of, oh my gosh, the only one that's going to give me permission to do anything in my life is me. Mm-hmm. And then my job is to give myself permission to let go of the people around me that don't want to support me, allow me to have the courage to really share my goals, my vision, my dreams with the ones that are around me, and then allow them to support me in getting there. And so it's this constant struggle. And so we're doing that over the year. We meet at my house in Nashville in March. And then in June, we're publishing a book with all of their stories about those defining moments, about where they were when they made a choice. And so our goal collectively is to create an amazing book that allows other women to feel like they're not alone, that they must be the only ones struggling. And if we did it, so can they. And then collectively we'll go out and we'll all promote the book. Typically we'll get it to Amazon #1, but I really have this big vision to get it to a New York Times list. Mm-hmm. And typically the way these books have worked, it hasn't worked that way, but I think we're onto something here. I'm just hearing it over and over again, the word permission. I just spent 2 days in a workshop with Steve Harrison and Jack with a bunch of authors and doctors and TV personalities, and all of them at some place along the line used that word, when I gave myself permission. And so that's kind of where we're at. That's the goal for this year. And because one day we think we have done it, and the next day we wake up and we think we were crazy. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, if you can relate to that.
Yep.
So I think what a lot of people don't know is they don't know your journey. And so I think first, if you wanted to give them whatever part of you're willing to share about the things that you've gone through to get to where you are and then where you are now. And also I think what we would all love to know is what's your best advice for all of us, because you've been there before us. And it's easier to look back and say what to do than it is to look forward and not have someone to help guide you.
Mm. Beautiful. Beautiful. So again, did you want to hear some of my story in regard to, well, I'll tell kind of, there's a fundamental story. So first of all, let me just say hi to each and every one of you. Congratulations on having made a very wise decision in your life, and that's to work, with Patty and Kate, and to really be in this mastermind and to really invest in yourself in this way. It's an investment that will pay off over many, many years in your life. So I'm happy for you. I'll just give you a little background on how I got into transformation. I grew up in Beaverton, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland. Had a high school experience. A great mom and dad, one sibling, 8 years older. When when I was in high school, I had a high school experience like most young girls dream about. I was class vice president on the drill team, lead the junior play, and homecoming princess in my junior year, all that. And at the end of my junior year in high school, I was pregnant. My high school boyfriend had gone off to college, came home on spring break. I get pregnant. May 1, I tell my mom and dad I'm now pregnant. My mother wept for me. This is 1966. She wept for me as if I had died. In her mind, all her dreams for me were dying. We had a very hasty 10-person wedding. A couple weeks later, now it's mid-May, the principal of the high school in the days when we had intercoms on the walls called me to his office and said, "Are these rumors I'm hearing about you true?" And I said, "Well, if the rumors are that I'm pregnant and married in that order, then yes, they're true." And he just put his head in his hands and he says, "Mary, you have great academics and terrific honors, but you will not be allowed to return here for your senior year. It would be totally inappropriate for a pregnant girl to get mixed in with the normal girls. But we do, if you want to graduate from high school, we do have a place where you can go, and it's a place for people like you. It's not held during daylight hours, it's after dark." It was actually in a part of Portland, Oregon I hadn't been allowed to drive in after dark. It was in North Portland. And it's where the pregnant girls and the delinquent boys go to high school. So the next fall, I drove across the river, parked my car, walked up to Washington High School, which without a sign change becomes Washington Evening High School. Walked in, registered. And this is a true story. It's odd, but I'm thinking every guy here is some kind of delinquent, and every girl is either pregnant or has a baby. So this is now September, and one of the guys says, "Hi, my name is Paul, but I'm no apostle." And the kid next to him says, "Yeah, this all happened fast." And he says, and my name is Peter, and I'm no saint." And I said, "My name is Mary, no comment," because I'm 6 months pregnant. And so my first son was born in December of 1966, and I graduated from Washington Evening High School in May of 1967. And in July of 67, this is where my life took a turn. I'm in an intensive care ward in a Portland hospital, having been diagnosed with fatal kidney disease. One kidney is totally destroyed with nephritis. The other kidney has 50% destruction and active nephritis, which in those days, without dialysis and transplants, this is a death sentence. I have a 7-month-old son and my husband, his dad, they're staying at my parents' house while he works during the day. My mom's watching my little boy. And they tell me that if we can get the blood toxin level in my body reduced enough so I can sustain a surgery to remove that right kidney, then maybe I'll have 6 months to live. And that's the best shot I'm going to get is 6 months. And the God of my upbringing, I'd been raised in a very fundamental Baptist type, my mother's religion. The God of my upbringing was not a friendly place to go when you felt like you had really screwed up. I mean, clearly I'd screwed up. I couldn't go to school. My best friends that I'd grown up with from 3rd grade, there were 4 of us, did all these things together. Their mothers got together and decided their girls could no longer see me after I got pregnant, as if what I had was contagious. So I lost my friends, my school, my reputation, and now I'm going to lose my life. And I clearly think I'm being punished, that was the worldview I had of what was going on with me. Finally, the surgery was scheduled. And the night before the surgery, a woman walked in my room. And this is really for all of us, how one conversation can be so pivotal. You know, you could come to this call, but there'll be one time Patty will say something, or one of you will say something, and it goes in at another whole level. So this didn't happen all at once for me, but this woman walks in who identifies herself as a volunteer chaplain, offering prayer for people who are going to have surgery. She's handed a list of who's having surgery the next day in the order of the most seriousness. My name's at the top of her list, and she wants to know if I want somebody to pray with me. And I was scared, and I said, okay. She pulls her chair next to my bed. She didn't do anything that resembled anything I'd ever been told about what prayer was. She talked to me. And she just pulled her chair up and she says, "So would you be willing to tell me what's been going on in your life the last year or two?" So I tell her my story. And at the end of my telling her my story, you know, high school, getting pregnant, kicked out, girlfriends can't see me, you know, all of that, she looked at me and she said, "Mary, everything's created twice." Now, I had no idea what she was talking about. She said, and then she said, "You know this. In fact, everybody knows it. Almost nobody knows the power of knowing this." She said, "The bed you're laying on, the nightgown you're wearing, the sheet covering you, the walls, the ceiling, the floor, the machines, all the machines you're hooked up to, everything had to be a thought before it could be a thing." And then she said, "And you know this." And then she said, "I hear how much you love your little boy, but I also hear how much you've been hating yourself. You feel like you shamed your school, you shamed your family, you shamed yourself. And now that you're thinking how everything is created twice, could you consider the possibility that there is a correlation between that toxic thinking and the toxicity that is rampaging your body and threatening your very life. This is 1967. This is long before there was a mind-body clinic at Harvard Medical Teaching Center. We did not have any kind of generalized understanding about the mind-body connection in the common nomenclature in 1967. It was like, this was outside of anything I'd ever heard about, that my thought could actually have something to do with my chemistry. So anyway, we talked for a moment, and then she said, she asked me if I could believe that we could say a prayer, which ultimately would change the frequency, and that I could just get, in the morning, they say, you look so much better, let's test you. And they say, you're fine. We don't know what happened, but get up, you can go home. She asked me if I could believe that could happen for me. And I told her the truth. No, there was not one part of me that I could find that was going to believe that she was going to say words. And I believe way more in my pain, and I had a lot of it, than, this woman walking in my room. And she said, all right, if you can't believe, could you believe this? Could you believe it's possible? She said, think in the universe. Think how many there's infinite possibilities. There has to be one. Could you believe there's one possibility where I could say words with you that you resonate with, and we're going to take everything that's toxic in your body, wherever it's stored, we're going to place it in that one kidney that's going to get removed. And when that kidney gets removed, instead of you getting worse, you actually start to get better, and you do get better, and you get well. Could you believe that's possible? And I said, well, I don't know if it's probable. I mean, it took me a moment to even get there, but maybe it's possible, because I could tell she believed it. I didn't believe it, but I could tell she believed it. And probably the first time in my life I ever decided to place my belief in someone else's belief that was operating at a higher frequency than mine. And that's part of the gift of being in this mastermind, is that you get to borrow each other's believing, borrow from each other's strength also, which is so powerful. Anyway, so I said, maybe it's possible. And she latched on to that. This is before Talbot had written Holographic Universe out of Stanford, where all it takes is one corner of your mind to decide to believe in something, and then you generate from there, and it changes the whole hologram. And then she said, so if you could live, what would you do with your life? And I said, well, I would raise my little boy. And I had always wanted to be a teacher. Even when I got pregnant, I thought, well, this is going to delay my ability to go to college, but I'm going to be a teacher. So I would raise my little boy, and I'd become a teacher. And so she said, okay, so here's what's going to happen. In a moment, we'll do she didn't call it a visualization, but that's really what it was. And then tomorrow you'll have the surgery. The first day or two, your mind's going to be busy with the pain of just the physical part of this surgery. As that begins to ease, your mind is going to want to go and think go down the same well-worn paths of thinking that you've been doing for the last year, and the same emotion. That thought and emotion actually has an impact on our biochemistry. So here's what I want you to do. Whenever a thought of self-loathing rises up, or a thought of guilt or shame rises up, and you notice it, say to that, no, that left with the kidney. And then immediately, Mary, imagine that you're walking up and going up the stairs into an elementary school, and you have a little boy's hand in yours. Feel the warmth of his hand. And that's your little boy, and you're walking him into kindergarten. And you're standing there, and he goes into the kindergarten class with his teacher, and you're happy, and he's happy, and you're so grateful to be taking your boy into kindergarten. And then you hear click, click, click of your heels, and you go around the corner, and there's your classroom, and you're a teacher. Then fast forward in your mind, and now you're in a great big auditorium or a stadium, and there's all these caps and gowns, and your son is graduating from high school. And you hear his name called, and he steps up and takes that diploma, and your heart just leaps with joy and pride for your son's accomplishment, but also your journey of helping him get to this great spot in his life. Then fast forward in your mind, and you're sitting in the front row of a wedding. It's your son's wedding. He's marrying the love of his life. And you're there, and how grateful you are. And you're teaching. So at the high school, my teaching career was growing, and at the wedding, my teaching career was flourishing. And she said, just keep repeating this. They did the surgery the next day. The doctor told my family the one kidney was totally destroyed. The other kidney was, withered and 50% destroyed and active nephritis. They didn't know how much time I would have. But over the next 10 days, my numbers stabilized. And then they just started slightly improving a bit. So after 2.5 weeks or so, they said, well, maybe you're going to have a little more time than we thought. So if you want to go home for a while, so you have to come to the urologist 3 times a week to get your, everything checked. I went home in an ambulance. I couldn't get my head off the pillow, but I was what's called an unconscious competent. I didn't think I'm doing this and it's helping me. I just did it. And over time, my numbers not only stabilized, but started slightly improving. And by the time somewhere in around the between 4 and 5 months, I'm sitting with the specialist, the surgeon, the urologist, my GP, and they're all scratching their heads saying, we have no science for why that one kidney is now functioning like a perfectly normal kidney. We don't know how long this will last. We don't know, but it's doing it right now. We're just going to write medical anomaly on your chart. And so even at 18, I'm 18 years old right then, I got like, what happened? Not immediately, but within the next year or two, I started thinking, what happened? That's not normal. That's, and it wasn't a miracle. It was something. And so I began to study what I could find. Then I got into undergraduate school, got my undergraduate in education, my master's in counseling, went 2 years to a seminary. My deep interest is in what is the art and the science of transformation. And I've been doing that work. I publicly studied a decade in that while I was getting all my other degrees, and then began teaching in 1981. And I've had the privilege of working with wonderful teachers and leaders and friends with most of them all over the world. So the idea of permission, and you're right, Patty, now there's the infinite. There's no permission withheld. In the infinite, I had permission to create kidney disease, not consciously, but I had permission to think self-loathing thoughts and have the result of those self-loathing thoughts. Permission, full permission. And the moment I wanted to shift that, I had full permission, because the infinite is life energy pouring into and through us right now. All of us, we're breathing. We didn't create ourselves. We can't make our heart beat one time under our own power. There's this sacred, wondrous thing called life, by any name you call it, that's pouring into and through us. And as it pours through us, it takes the vibration of our major dominant thought patterns, which are emotionally charged with, you think a thought, that thought has electrical pulse to it. It communicates through the corpus callosum. It sends that electrical signal through the fluid that goes around the brain and up and down the spinal cord, sending that same vibration through every fiber, tissue, organ, bone, but it doesn't stop at our skin. We're communing and communicating with this energy, this living, intelligent, responsive energy. And it is. And so it gives permission to mirror back to us. It gives us full permission to create and generate our own experience. We don't create the weather today, but we create our own experience of the weather. We create our own experience of no matter what happens in life. So I'll stop there, but there's a lot more things over time.
I'm just like, thank you.
You're welcome.
I thought this call was, it's amazing. I'm sorry I'm so emotional, but I was having the same surgery in 1967.
Really?
And so, gosh, it's like, wow. So you're amazing. And, they told my parents I would die. Mm-hmm. And, I kind of didn't believe it. And I had St. Jude and all the people coming in and doing the same thing. And a guy, my parents just wouldn't give up. My dad was selling to pharmacists, and he would ask every pharmacist, who do you know? Who do you know? And no one could come up with what was wrong with me. And what really happened was my ureters were not attached completely. And so everything was going into my body. So my kidneys were kind of getting necrotic, and my body was completely toxic. And it's interesting how it all ties together, because what I always teach is we look so far outside of ourselves when everything we need is inside of us or right in front of us. And my dad just happened to have a conversation with a neighbor who had like a 5th grade education. And she said, well, I know this Chinese doctor, and he just came here, and you should see him. And the minute I went in and saw him, they said, she'll just have surgery in the morning or she'll be dead in a week. And the rest of the world said she'll be on dialysis forever. My parents wouldn't give up. And so after that, I had surgery, and I've had, a few kidney infections and, bladder infections until I started seeing real Chinese doctors after that later on. And I'm here today, and I know, like, you're just reinforcing for me that that's exactly why I'm here. So thank you for that. I've known you for so long. I did not know that story. We have so much more in common now, and I just want to be you when I grow up. Wasn't that amazing?
You.
I just got a text from Kate. She said, "Oh my gosh, I feel so blessed. She's brilliant."
Oh, thank you.
And I didn't have Kleenex next to me, but I was literally, tears came to my eyes. And I think what you said about, and I've just been getting this lately, and you just say it so beautifully about when we give ourselves permission, if we do give ourselves permission. And I remember the day when I decided to start this project. And of course I was in the car with Jack and I was mad at him. And I decided I was going to give myself permission to be a bitch. And, that's that low vibration. But it was the first time I'd actually said it out loud. And so when you don't know how to do it, you're not always as graceful.
No, that's right. Well, we weren't graceful when we took our first steps walking either. We were wobbly.
Yes.
We fell down doing it. The difference is that as a little kid, we never once threw our hands up and said, "That's it, I'm never going to be a walker." We just leaned in and let ourselves, do it wobbly.
Right. But what you said about the vibration and the analogy used from the brain and how it goes out into all the organs and then out to the people and how it mirrors. I mean, I think we all see that. And sometimes consciously at least I know, I'm sure all of the women on the call know, we know we're not doing it in a way that we're going to get the outcome we want. But sometimes I would say we'd rather be right than happy. So we get stuck sometimes in the process. So the formula that you've created to create this about how important that vibration inside of us is as important. You can't lie, right? You can say that nice.
No, there's the infinite has perfect hearing and perfect seeing. It reads the vibration. The only person you're lying to is yourself. When you turn on the television, whatever you see on the screen is a perfect output of the vibrational match of your tuner. So when we want the picture, and if you want the pictures to change, you don't sit in front of the television and beg it to change or meditate it to change or affirm it to change. You change the vibration. And after many, many years of working with tens of thousands of people, it's exactly the same thing in us. If you want the picture of your life to change, you go to a movie theater, you don't go to the screen and try to move the images on the screen. You go to the projection booth and you lay down new film. Easy to do, much easier in a movie house than in us because we have a lot of decades of patterning about how we relate to things. Also want to say, particularly to women, a lot of this idea that we need permission is stored for at least 100,000 years in the brain that we bear as women. Because up until, I remember when my mother was able to get her own bank account in her own name. We have thousands and thousands of years, whereas women, even though it's not actually true for us, our system doesn't totally know it. That we had to have permission for everything, even to be able to feed our children or have a roof over our head. And so the only way we were able to have what we wanted was through manipulation and seduction. And so manipulation and seduction then are very common ways of being that women who don't really recognize their own inner authority use unconsciously. And they're never fulfilling. They never take us where we want to go. But it seems to work in the moment for something that we think we want, that somebody else, we've given them authority over us. But if we know that it's not really you, you, every one of us is more than our body, more than our equipment that we use. And so when you start to notice it, notice that temptation towards manipulation or kind of being squirrely with the truth, or running energies that when you're done or even while you're doing them, don't leave you feel who you want to be. Mm-hmm. One of the great tools that has helped me over many, many years, first and foremost, the tool of awareness that will continue to help you throughout your whole life it doesn't belong to me. It's just one that you find everywhere when you look deep into philosophies and even religions. And today, and of course, transformational trainings, is to notice what you're noticing. Until you notice what you're noticing, you can't notice the thought you're thinking. You can't notice the temptation towards manipulation or seduction. You can't notice that you're now engaging in gossip again. You can't notice yourself until later you kind of look back and then you can see it. Way easier to change energy and patterns Because remember, your ground, the garden in your backyard isn't going to tell you, no, you don't want to plant that seed. I'm not going to grow that seed because it's not going to be good for you. It's going to grow every seed you plant. And so our thoughts and the vibration and the emotion that we have, it's going someplace. It's not just subtle. I mean, it's going into this responsive, reflective intelligence system that will, by spiritual law, reflect it back to us in some form, particularly the major dominant ones. So as you begin to notice what you're noticing, until we notice what we're noticing, nobody's hand is on the helm of our own thinking. We're actually not even in charge of our own thinking. Our thoughts are in charge of us. And when our thoughts are in charge of us, doubt and fear and worry can come find us. It has permission to wire through our whole life. It'll join us for dinner. It'll crawl into bed with us. It'll jump out while we're brushing our teeth at night. But as you begin to govern your own, most important real estate you'll ever own is your own inner world. And it's subtle. And you can make every day a better day than the day before. So it's a practice to notice what you're noticing, and then notice, is this thought, do I feel more expansive or contractive? Mm-hmm. Because what you want, all the dreams and goals you have are an expanded version of your life in form. That's why you would call it a dream or a goal. I would love to make this much money. I'd love to have this much impact. I'd love to be sure my kids feel and are supported in, or whatever the goals and dreams are. It's life seeking to express itself in an expanded way in our life in the form of results, because we're going to have results anyway. Just keep breathing and you're going to have results. Just breathe another 365 days. You'll have results in 4 areas of life where all humans create results: health, relationships, what you're doing with your time and talent, vocation, and what your time and money freedom looks like, whether it's constraint or more freedom than it was before. But one of the great tools for doing that in the here and now, which is the only place your real power exists, is in noticing what you're noticing, and then is it expansive or is it contractive? If it's contractive, shift it.
Stop it.
Well, you have to replace it. You can't just stop it.
Right. I totally agree.
Replace it. You release that and lay down new track. You say, okay, not that, this. In the way she didn't tell me, just stop being self-loathing, Mary. Say, no, that left with the kidney, and now my life is like this. And so I'm laying down new track it to relate to. Nothing in my life has changed. I've got my head on a pillow. I can't lift my head. And that's part of why so few people ever find what you're finding here in this mastermind group. But here, for all of you who are here, almost nobody knows this. Everybody can name their 5 senses. By the time we're 3, we're pointing to our nose and our ears. And nobody taught us the tools by which we transact with the infinite side of our own nature, which are 6 mental tools that we're using all the time. Imagination is one of those. Mm-hmm. But most of us use our imaginations to terrorize ourselves. We think about all the things that could go wrong. And,
I've never heard it that way, but it's true. Gosh, you're so articulate the way you make it land. I think we can all relate to that. And I'm so excited for this call, because I've gotten to that place now where I'm like, oh yeah, there I go. It's after Hoffman, it was the left road or the right road, and all the different ways of saying it. I've never heard anybody say it as brilliantly as you. I'm not kidding. And I've heard a lot of people. And for me, it's taken 30 years to get here in a way. Just from the time I started in transformation to now. And of course we have our amazing times, and we've both been there, and then you kind of go down and then you kind of come back up. And so, but then to really put it all together, my dream is for this same exact talk to go into every single high school and sorority. And, it's so interesting that we have the answers. And if we could teach that to the younger generation to start to think that way. And I just remember with my son, my nephew who I raised was in rehab, and they kept saying, we have stopped doing heroin. And then they'd all sit in a room and smoke cigarettes, and it's like, well, let's replace it with something else. So that drug's out. Let's bring in meditation. So that concept, and actually really saved his life in a lot of ways. So before you go into your next piece, which is going to be, I can't wait for, I want to keep you on the phone all day now. I know Kate has a question. She's just itching to say something.
Oh no, I'm just embracing it all. I did have a question. I just wrote one in here, but that was a secondary question. My My question was around where you were sharing your, first of all, hi, Mary. Thank you for being
Hi,
here.
Kate. Good to see you.
Such a pleasure to have you. We're all just so excited. We're diving right in, aren't we? As you were in your story and you were sharing around that 2-year span after this, I know you said it might not have been a miracle. I was feeling like it was a miracle the whole time, and I'm all about miracles. So I'm going to say this miraculous thing that happened to you.
It was.
The awareness around it is a miracle in itself, right?
You bet. The miracle is really, it's in, for me, a miracle is, it's not outside spiritual law. It's not like the hand of God comes in and does something that's not how God, the infinite, the energy works. But it's outside our ordinary understanding of it. Because the ordinary understanding, common thinking, was you're going to die, So, but it was the application of an understanding that opened the door to things that can happen. Yeah.
Beautiful. That precisely. And over this 2-year span, you're having this awareness, this clarity, this understanding, and you start to become clear about wanting to further understand, right, the art and the science of transformation, which obviously has led you to, what I'll call your life purpose, and allowing you now to be this teacher for all of us, right? So there's people on this call who have gone through this journey, right, with Patty and I, in the time that we've been together with them, and maybe some prior things we've worked on together. And they may be at the point now where they're clear, right, on this is what I need to be doing, or this is how I need to show up, or this is what I want to give back to people and leave as my legacy. My question is, a lot of us identify that, but I don't know that many of us have also this brilliance to continue to build the legacy that you've built, right, to really show up and deliver this very powerfully back to the world. So is there anything that you can share with us around your journey of identifying how you would like to show up for the world and then putting it into practice in a way that was very successful?
Okay, sure. I have, I'd be happy to share some tools that have helped me do that. And also share a story in regard to some of that too. And it's evolution. I mean, I didn't know you follow, there's an old, I heard it many, many years ago, is go to the edge of the light you see. And even biblically, there's a story, a psalm, I think, in the Old Testament where David says, "The Lord is a lamp unto my feet, casting a light upon my path." It's like one day he's writing, this shepherd boy is writing these poems, and he goes, "I get it. This is how it works. The Lord, or the infinite, is a light unto my feet." Because in those days, they travel, Israel's a rocky and hot in the summer, like extremely hot place. So they travel at night. And they in groups when they have to go, to market or whatever. And they've got baskets on their heads and kids' hands, and they strap foot lamps on themselves. They don't carry light. It's rocky. You're going to trip and fall. So they put little oil lamps on their feet. And he's saying it's like that. The light casts the step to take. If I take that step, then the next step is revealed. But if I'm waiting for a whole map, I'll never get there. If I want every light green before I get out of the driveway, it's you let yourself, you go to the edge of the light you can see. So it was become an elementary teacher. I hardly got my teacher certificate. I knew the content I wanted to teach was not the curriculum I would be handed in elementary school. But I did it also. I did it for about 3 years. Meanwhile, I went to seminary, and I knew, so it's evolutionary. You go to the edge of the light you see. And know that, and this occurred to me one day on a walk, not at the beginning of my journey, but many years, decades later. The content of my life is the curriculum of my own evolution. So no matter what's going on, this is the content that is exactly right for my own evolution, for my growth, which includes when it doesn't look good also. I had decades of, and this when Jack and Chicken Soup is just going off the charts, and different teachers. I mean, Neil Walsh and I, all these, and Wayne and I became friends, and Wayne Dyer and I in the 80s, and people coming through I built a church that had thousands of people coming. I was speaking at the UN. Was working with the Dalai Lama multiple times. was now in a second marriage. I was married to my kid's dad. We had 4 kids together. We were married 27 years. And at midlife, and we were never a good fit really on so many levels with each other, because as we grew up, we weren't a great match, but we loved each other and we loved our kids, and we were really good parents together. And I got real engaged in my work. And so we separated at 40, 42. He was 44. And then a couple of years later, I met and fell in love with this CPA, bright, smart guy who I knew had depression disorder when I married him. Even with a master's degree, I had no idea really what it was going to be like. Or what, and he was not only involved in managing portions of the church, finances, but 11 other businesses. Long story. It went fairly well for 3 or 4 years, and then he got more and more depressed and angry, and was busy at work. And then when my dad died in end of 2002, I stayed at home for 6 weeks in a row, opened some mail, and so I found out about a hidden mortgage I didn't know about, and got very angry when I asked questions. Ultimately, I got outside people to look, and the more they looked, the more they found, not only just in our personal life, but in the church. And there was money missing. There was $1 million of money missing, and 11 businesses were all commingled. And ultimately, he would go spend a year in a mental hospital until he could tell the truth about all the falsified. He got very suicidal. They diagnosed him as manic, as bipolar. So he would get in these states and it wasn't like he stored money for himself, but he would take money from here, this business, and put it in that one, thinking that deal was going to happen and everybody'd get repaid. And he just had gotten himself into and these 11 businesses, my church, one of them. So as a president of a nonprofit, you have to report that, which I wanted to report it, but it became public. It was, and in a church is a faith community. So if you lose faith in your leadership, I went the first Sunday when I found this out, I went to the church and it was like 3,000 people. I said, since the day I opened this church, I told you the truth. I'm telling you the truth now. There has been financial impropriety here. And in that moment, we didn't know how big it was. How big it is, how deep it goes, we don't know. The board and I have brought in outside consultants, CPAs, attorneys to take hold of this and find out what's going on. We're not going to have business meetings inside our Sunday morning services. We'll be having meetings, you'll be notified, and all the business of the church will be handled over there. But this is what's going on. Well, that changes the dynamic, And ultimately, about 4 or 5 months later, we had to declare bankruptcy. I lost the work I had built. I lost the Oregonian, the newspaper in the state I had grown up in, who had for years been printing Mary with the Dalai Lama, Mary with the best-selling book, Mary with this, now Mary the conniving minister who fleeced her flock. And this is all public. And it was such a spiritually, on every level, challenging. I lost my house, my marriage, my work. Not all my friends. Many of my friends, Marianne Williamson, all of them kept bringing me to their stages. But the day I gave the final sermon, and then took the board and I resigned, and the leadership we had trained, they formed a new church. And the next Sunday, they furthered the work under a different name and with different leadership. But it was leadership we had trained together. And it's still going on today. But I was just devastated. He was still in the mental hospital at this point. Then later he would go to prison. It was very challenging for me personally to really come to terms with the fact that he had a capacity to look me in the eye, look others in the eye, and just tell us things that just so were not true. And so I remember so I went to the Oregon coast and I found a place to stay. I just thought I'd go for a day. And that afternoon I walked into a real estate office this is in 2004 now. But it took that long to unwind. No, yeah, 2000, a year to do the investigation and find everything. And then so it was a few months later. And I walked the beach that afternoon. I thought an afternoon of walking is not going to do it for me. I need more time here. So I went to a real estate office and walked in the Sunday afternoon, nobody in there except a woman. She says, "Oh, Mary." She says, "Oh, honey, you've been through it, haven't you?" And I didn't know who she was. She says, "You don't know me. I've come to your women's retreats." And she says, "How can I help you?" So I told her, "Do you know if somebody has like a bedroom to rent? I didn't have a job. I didn't really have money." And she says, "Well, there's a couple that have built a beautiful new home here, and it takes 4 months to get in the rental pool. And they were just down here last weekend and said if I knew somebody I trusted who would just pay the utilities, you could stay there for the cost of the utilities." So I had this wonderful, beautiful place to stay. And she said, you can have it for 90 days. So I stayed. I walked that beach. First 5 weeks, I cried my eyes out. And why I tell you this story is even when you know things and you practice, the content of our life is the curriculum of our own evolution. This became the content of my life. I mean, publicly trashed. I mean, it was just, there were things completely outside my control that I had been part of. Some of it, believing in him. Some of it I believed in him. Others of it more unconsciously. But then here it is. I mean, and things happen in a book written in 1100 AD called Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. He says, in every person's life, there are some things that happen that seem so horrible at the moment they happen. Something happens with your child, or somebody steals your money, or somebody breaks your heart, or you're driving and you look down and you run into somebody, or things happen in this life. And he says, when the dark night comes upon you, so when something happens, it's very dark in your life. He says, the first thing you do is do everything you can do to try to make it go away. When you discover your power is not enough to make it go away, if you surrender to it. So it's a given that certain things are going to happen in life. Some of them you're going to be in love with, some of them you're not. But if you don't know that you have a source in you that's greater than no matter what can happen, it's very, very challenging. And some people get defined by those things for the whole rest of their life. You don't want to get defined by it. You are more than that, but not if you don't either know it or get support in knowing it. And why being in this mastermind group, so that no matter what happens, you've got a group of people who help you stay awake to the fact that you are more than that circumstance. You're more than that situation. You're more than that condition. So when the dark night comes, the first thing you do is try to make it go away. When you discover your power is not big enough or great enough to make it go away, if you surrender to it, like, okay, here it is, 3 things will happen. The first is a feeling of release. The second, a feeling of relief, because you've set it down, you've stopped fighting it. Okay, here it is. I can't change the fact that it's here. Here it is. And he said, and the third thing is a strange feeling will come upon you. And this is the feeling that you don't want it to end too soon, because you actually do want everything it came to give you. So when Napoleon Hill says every adversity has within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. But like any seed, it has to be found and planted and nurtured and grown and harvested. It doesn't feel like a benefit. I mean, by any shape. It does not feel that way. But in truth, in the land of fact, it's horrible. In the land of truth, there's something good and greater in everything if you work with it properly. So I'm walking the beach. About five weeks. I've been bereft and crying and mad at him, mad at my board. I had 3 CPAs on my board. It was supposed to be watching and reviewing. So when we get to board meetings, and they would say the numbers look great, and it was like all of us kind of sleepwalking. And mostly I was mad at myself. Because in hindsight, you can look back and you can see this and this and this and this that I didn't let myself see. Now I could see more and more of it. And then ultimately I would realize, oh, Mary, you were more afraid as a public person of a second divorce than seeing the truth. And one day, about 5 weeks in, I'm walking the beach crying, and I heard the voice. I'd stopped crying that day, and I'm walking, and I heard, "You're still breathing." And I wept. I was so happy to hear that part of myself I hadn't been hearing. It was like the voice went away. I was just broadcasting grief so loud I couldn't hear it. You're still breathing. And then I heard, dark chapter, not your whole book. And it was the first thought, like, oh, I could write another book. I could write. And I could write more chapters in this book of my life. And then this may or may not relate to any of you here, but it related to me. I heard, what did he do on Saturday? And I knew what that meant. As a minister, a woman who had been a minister I was, no longer going to be a minister. I was going to now go out and teach transformation differently. But I'd done it for 23 years. I'd done 23 Good Friday meditations. I'd done 23 Easter Sunday morning services. And I never once asked, what did he do on Saturday? Friday's the crucifixion. Sunday's the resurrection. What happens on Saturday? And I realized I was in a Saturday. that the old life was gone. The new life had not yet begun. And you want to do Saturday well. So that place of transition between the old and the new. And for me, that meant I got some help doing this. I rented a place I didn't want to do anything on Sundays. There were now 5 churches seeking to emerge out of the ashes of my church. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to compete with that in any way. I knew I was not going to open a new church, but I wanted to make myself available to thousands of congregants who would look to me as their minister. And the only information they were getting was in the newspaper. And they needed to get with me and cry with me and blame me and accuse me and do all those things. And so I got some help. I mean, a lot of my board members were right there. They saw it from the inside out. A lot of friends. So I started renting a place on Tuesday nights, and I would say, we're going to do a short service at the end of which you can ask me any question you've got. I'll stay as long as you've got questions, and no questions out of bounds. And oh man, the first few months were like, how could you not know? You're a smart woman. Don't tell us you didn't know. It's just stuff, process. And eventually the questions went away and they just wanted the service. And that, meanwhile, I was starting to grow my work. I'd never been in the profit-making world. I didn't know this world yet. And I had great friends who helped me, who had been doing this for a long time and advising me on how to take the work that I had been doing, but now put it in a secular, more public way. And I mean, I also made another decision that I'm very proud about. The congregants and I, when we bought this large property, we weren't like a Catholic church where you have a big mother church who supports you. So we put together congregational funding with the goal that eventually we would be able to pay off that with a traditional mortgage. So we had originally it was 10 million. We had paid off about 3.5 of it. So we had $6.5 million of congregant debt. And of course, bankruptcy attorneys want you to bankrupt everything. But these were my congregants. And spiritually, I felt they didn't just trust the church, they trusted Mary. They trusted me. And that my work as a teacher just would not make sense to me if I didn't at least attempt to pay that money back. Now, at this moment, I've filed bankruptcy. I have no income. I have a trashed reputation. But I have always believed if you do what's right, there's you make welcome and energy in your life that comes from truth, that doesn't operate at other frequencies. It operates at the level of truth. And regardless, I would sleep well at night if I was attempting. So I agreed to pay 50. So when we put up an escrow, I also said this has to be done legally somehow, or the congregants will not think that I'm, anybody can say, oh, I'm eventually going to pay you back. I said, this has to be systematic, regular, and something that's managed not by me. And so we put an escrow account in the state. And then it was 15 cents on every gross dollar that came my way. So when you live in California, which I had now moved to California, start my work here, 15 cents on the dollar, you pay 37% federal tax, and then the 14%. So it was like 33 cents left to live on. And my first thought was, how am I going to live on 33 cents of every dollar? And I heard you just better make a lot of 33 cents then.
That's like a book royalty.
And that's where I began this new work. Now it's been 15 years later, 16 almost. And within 2 years, and this is the truth, within 2 years, my work had grown so much. My life was so much. I mean, I look back and I let go of that old life with claw marks all the way to the edge of it. And within 2 years, I remember turning to a former board member who we were doing some work together. I said, oh my gosh, Karen, if that had all worked, we would still be there. And there felt so constrictive to what. So when I say the content of our life is the curriculum of our own evolution, it's the curriculum, it's the training ground. It's who we become in the process. If we resist and fight and blame and accuse and make our results and our experiences somebody else's fault, we've taken the power outside ourselves. There are influencers, but at the end of the day, the place of power is inside ourselves. And I will just say happily, that just 2 weeks ago, I wrote my final $2 million check and paid that all off.
Oh.
So it was like, thank you. And I've been saving up for that final check, that final payment check, paying the 50%. And it's just, I think I should write a book someday. There's no way to get there from here because
Well, hurry.
the way you get there is from the vision. You can't get to a dream. You have to come from it. In the same way, if you're tuned to CNN, you can't get to discovery from the frequency of CNN. You got to change the frequency, and everything CNN dissolves, and everything discovery comes in. And we're dealing with the physics. God's love, the infinite's love, whatever you call it, is unconditional. But the laws are perfect. Gravity is going to work just the way gravity works. Electricity has to be wired to code. And if we want the picture in our mind to be the result in our life, we have to work the way the infinite works. You're not going to meditate it there. The value of meditation is to put yourself in the vibration that's harmonious with the vision, because the art and science, the art is in the visioning. So you want clarity, specificity, a crystal clear picture of this or something better still you would love, and then match the vibration of that and endeavor to live that life as you can with what you've got in the day you're in. Giving gratitude for and looking at the pictures of your life as they are right now that are not a match to your vision, and simply look at them saying, this is what it simply looks like while this is all coming together. Because if the more, and good news, you don't even have to do it perfectly, but you want to be more of a match to your vision than to your conditions. But common hour thinking is all condition based. I get to do this when my conditions changed. I get to give myself permission when my conditions tell me I can. And there's no real freedom in that. Mm-hmm. You're always condition based. So
I have like 1,000 questions on this one.
Okay.
And I know other people do that on the surrendering part. So when I'm going to watch this replay about 1,000 times, Mary, it's going to change my world.
Yeah, you bet.
So as you go through this and you see, I had a very kind of a similar incident, and it was a defining moment for me. And I've had some. I don't know if I was aware of it in the time. So when you were going through that, and they were asking you like, "Well, why didn't you know?" And I'm sure you probably had that own dialogue on those 5 weeks or those 3 months on the beach. Like, why didn't I know? Like, you beat yourself up first, right? And you have to get through it, and you cry about it and get pissed off and all those things.
Yeah, and I won't tell you that I got final resolution in 5 weeks. It was a process over really probably a couple of years. But I knew at the end of that 90 days at the beach that I was more afraid of of public opinion. It was such an interesting thing, the whole line that what I feared greatly came upon me. So I got trashed in public opinion. And the curriculum of that was, I remember looking out my window of my house, thinking, this is on the front page of the Oregonian, as if it's true. As everybody's thinking this. And I just realized it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. I know the truth. I never once made a decision ever that I believed was going to harm my congregation or my church. That is not what I did. But I did let myself not look at things. And when I would feel a little rattle in myself, rather than he would get so angry and upset and mad. And then my little girl, when I talk to you about women who we have this programming about needing to have permission to, I acted like a little girl in the area of finances. I thought I had proper controls. I have a very, very different relationship with my financial world in the last 15 years. With all kinds of checks and balances that I just trusted, and they were all men. Who I'm the guy, it was not as overt as you're the woman, just keep your pretty head over there, but it was in there. And I was happy to have somebody else manage the finances so I could teach and speak and travel and write. Mm-hmm. And I still love to speak and teach and travel and write. And
me too. And I still hate my finances, but I know, that should be your next book. And for me, I remember having homes in Hawaii, selling chicken soup, 2008, the world tumbles down. 2012, I find myself with a $14 million debt on a home on the ocean in Maui, and everything in my head I was frozen. I was paralyzed. And I think what happens sometimes we don't know that process so well that we can get ourselves out of it quickly enough. And I remember and I mean, it was as clear as day. I was driving to work and I got to the top of the hill just before we could go down the hill into Jack's area. And there was this mailbox. And I pulled over and I said, what is the worst thing that could happen right now? And I just went, I could just lose everything. And then I went, oh my gosh, I felt this sense of release. I suddenly went, if I lost everything, I don't need to give a shit about anything. I mean, it was like I was just so overwhelmed. And then through that, I got this feeling that I'd been holding this box, trying to control something that did not exist. And it was an opinion. It was my anger, my fear. It was all in this glass box that if I just let it go, wasn't really there. It was imaginary, but it was almost like I held myself hostage. And so I let it.
Part of it was there. Part of it, Patty, part of it was there. I mean, it was $14 million in debt. You couldn't, with a house you couldn't sell. I mean, that's in the land of fact can be a very frightening thing if you feel like that can't happen to me. I can't let that happen. Then you're fighting the circumstance. Kate, you just got your answer from Patty. Here's Kate. Yeah, Kate asked, so how do you surrender?
Yes.
You look the fear square in the face. And if it happens, first, when fear or doubt, is worry and that's in the human condition. This is my belief. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. In the human experience, it's temporary. There's a beginning and an end to it. In spirit, it's eternal. So in the intersection between the infinite side of our nature and the finite side of our nature is this here and now moment. And if you are noticing what you're noticing, you are more than your human experience. But not if you don't notice, because it's coming in through the five senses at such a powerful rate, we can forget if we don't do things like this to remind ourselves. So Patty said, I felt, and she goes, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Then you drill it down to size. So the fear is, oh my God, this could happen, this could happen. It's like, all right. This is how I use when fear, doubt, and worry tries to get me around. Oh my, you blew up one business, you can blow up another one.
Yeah, that's going there.
Is it happening right now? No. Do I want it to happen? No. So since it's not happening, the fear is not happening right now, and it's not something I want to happen, I refuse to give it my life force, because the only way it can happen, generally, is through my imbuing it with my own energy of aliveness. I will bring it to me. My worry, even the worry about it, is so highly charged. So when Napoleon Hill, after all his research, he said, any thought, maybe this was Andrew Carnegie, I'm not sure, any thought that is greatly feared or greatly revered, highly charged, like, this just can't happen. Just got to have this. That any thought that is greatly feared or greatly revered begins immediately to clothe itself in the most convenient substance available. The first place, it clothes itself. So I was like, oh my God, all my friends in high school, all my friends are rejecting me. They're just nobody, they won't see me. And the most convenient substance available was my body. You notice it. You can have a tremendous shot of adrenaline from an imaginary thought. I mean, a thought that something's not even happening. But your body bears witness to it first. Your energy bears witness to it. Your emotions, and then your circumstances. And it's the nature of creation. So when you notice something that you don't want to have happen, we're wiring in fear. You say, is it happening now? Do I want it to happen? And then you do what Patty said. Then you look at it and say, and by the way, if you happen anyway in my life, my God and I will handle it. We've been handling everything since the first breath I took. We're going to handle everything right to the last breath I take in this dimension. And for me, I've used that so many times. There's a sense of, boogeyman. When you go in the house at night and it's dark, you cannot chase the dark. No matter how hard you try, you cannot chase the dark away. You turn on the light and it dissolves. And that's what happens. When you tell yourself the truth, it dissolves that. And you may have to tell it more than once till your system, who's been patterned to wire more with fear than security. Right. But every time, as you grow, everything unlike who you're becoming has to rise up. It's like the part of you saying, who are you? What do you think you can? It rises up, not just to bother you. It rises up to be released and repatterned. Those are patterns in us that are not a match for who we say we're going to be now. It's good that it rises up. That's actually good news, that fear or doubt rises up trying to talk you out of it, so you can look at it and say, no, I'm not, this is not what I want in my life. And then you repattern it and you affirm, you say words to yourself, and you're doing this, the internal conversation. If you're noticing what you're noticing, you will notice how much of that is a diminishing critical conversation, and you can lay down new track so that way more of it is a supportive, good girl, look at you today. You got what it takes, that there's an inner friendliness that is cultivated. It's not something that happens to you. It's something that happens with you and through you.
So if we go back to what you said in the very beginning about how, at this point, I finally say, okay, I'm not in charge. Let's face it. So there's a plan. And
you are in charge of your own thinking. You're not in charge of everything that happens, but you are absolutely 100% in charge of your response to it.
Correct. So, for example, when you talked about release, relief, and strange feeling, for me, suddenly I'm having this awareness right now because I had that. And so what happened for me in my $14 million or my husband's grandiose, I'm living in 2,000 square feet in Santa Barbara and I have a 10,000 square foot house in Hawaii. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But what I didn't realize, and if I could realize, and if there was a process to go through where I didn't know what was going to happen, but when I let go of it, then I could get out of my way to say, okay, now what? If I was my own client, what would I do? So I could start to get more, logical, not totally disconnect, but say, all right, what are the steps that need to happen? But as I went through the journey, not knowing then, I'm in Hawaii, I bring in John Gray and some different people. And it turned out that only John and Bonnie, bless her soul, were there with me. And I said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with the two of these people? I don't really know them that well. I felt kind of awkward. It was all meant to happen. John calls in the psychic who lives on the island of Maui. And she says, can I talk? And Morrissey was there and a couple others, and she was doing readings. And she said, can I talk to you? And I said, okay. So we went into the guest house at Ohana. And she said, I'm just telling you that this house is here to teach you a lesson, and it will strangle you until you embrace it. And I said, what is the lesson? Just tell me what it is. And now the house is built, and I'm trying to figure out how to save it, use it, and save my own thoughts of, oh my gosh, you made all this money early on, and now it's all going to go away. And she said, you need to embrace your voice as a teacher. And when you do, it will set you free. And I went, please don't make me do this too. I'm already in all this trauma. Let Jack go do that or whatever it was. Like, give everybody else that job. But through that, part of my process was I had to create a luxury retreat. I've done 14 of them since then, made millions of dollars on it, but it forced me through this other side. So if after those three things could be the strange feeling, and then, all right, so what is this taking me? This is the opening of the doors to my next level. What's it going to look like? And where do and how do I stay in that zone to say, wow, that fear, all right, something good's coming, because really it has totally defined me of who I am today. I mean, more so than all the work I did, I had to go through that. And my husband was dying in the hospital, literally at the time. He's alive now. And at that time I thought, if he doesn't die, I will kill him, because I was sort of blaming him. But do you have a process that you go through that says, all right, wait, everything's hitting the fan, I'm in my own way? Do you have like a little way that you sort of do something? Is there a ritual of any kind that you can get yourself out of there?
Yeah. A couple of things I will say around that. And I see some text. One is Jackie's text. That's a great gratitude practice. I think Jackie is the way to say your name. One of two things is happening at any given moment. Either I'm having a circumstance or the circumstance is having me. I'm either in my point of authority or I'm in a victim mindset. So when I think it's happening to me and that I'm not at the center of my own experience, Meister Eckhart once said, God is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Meaning there's no ending to this presence, this power. It's perfect everywhere. It's everywhere. It looks like there's gap between you and me. This is solid. It's spirit. We have an individualized sense of it. And for the purpose of bringing forth a particular version of life as unique as your thumbprint, as your soul print. When we remind ourselves this, Patty, and you notice what you're noticing, that's why you're noticing contraction, the downward pull, or expansion, where this world, our human experience, is held together through the law of polarity. There's life and death. That's polarity. There's male and female. There's up and down. There's good and bad. So by contrast, see, in spirit, there's no contrast. There's no observer. There's no you and me. That's in this world. So through contrast, then we have the experience that we get to evolve our souls in. And it's we're not always remembering that. So when something is happening, and Kate, you ask about surrender. Surrender is deciding it. Once you figure out, I can't change that it happened or that it's happening. I can only change who I'm going to be in it, who I'm going to be in the situation. I couldn't change that there was $1 million missing out of that church. I couldn't change there was public opinion going on. I couldn't decide what the Oregonian was going to print. I couldn't do any of those things, but I could decide who I was going to be in the moment, and whether or not I was going to try to blame or accuse or, look, poor me, look what he did, or take responsibility for my own experience and my own things that I had participated. I trusted him. Nobody else did that.
I was too busy speaking and training and traveling, and
besides, there's 3,000 of you who want me to do your weddings and your funerals and blah, 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 yeah, for me, yeah, no.
It's an easy one, isn't it?
So for each of us here, you may not be most of us in this call, we're not in a dark night moment right now. Things are going really well, and you've got something that's seeking to emerge by means of you. That the spirit in us is ever seeking a freer, fuller, expanded version of itself. That's why you want to grow. That's why you want. Want is a sacred thing, not at the expense of someone else, and not a want by which you can't have gratitude while you're living your life. It's the want of growth, because as in spirit, we love to grow. Spirit loves fun and growth. And you could have fun and growth even when the circumstances aren't what you want them to be, when you get yourself aligned right. Mm-hmm. So, yes, a gratitude practice every day till you feel it before you put your feet on the floor. That's my practice as well. I do it a little differently, but so I'm in that. Gratitude is the frequency that's harmonious with abundance. There's gratitude for, there's gratitude if and when. That's one of the lowest frequencies of gratitude there is. If this happens and when that happens, then I'll be grateful. That's projected condition-based gratitude. There's another which is grateful for my hands that allow me to hug my husband, grateful for my feet that move when I ask them to, grateful for, and it is still condition-based gratitude, but it's at a higher frequency. And then there's another level of gratitude, which is generative gratitude. It isn't condition-based. It's not based on the conditions. It's, if you need a condition at all, it's just simply I'm alive today. A day of life. No, I will never have this day. This is what I say to myself in the morning. When I start to notice that I'm waking up. This day has never happened, not in eternity. It will never happen again, not in eternity. The exact configuration of the clouds will never be exactly the same today. Maybe I be awake to the wonder of this day. Nobody gets to think my thoughts today but me. No one gets to make my choices today but me. The infinite God, I say God, has given me a wonderful gift right in my hands. And I get to create it any way I choose. So maybe I awake enough to live into this day, not only with gratitude, but appreciation. And I don't put my feet on the floor and some days it's just easy. And other days there's something going on and I'll wake up with a little bit of that residue even though I did my best to reframe it the night before. And I'll have to do it until I get to the vibration. It's not the words, it's the vibration. The words are framers for the vibration, but they're empty unless you fill them with the feeling.
That's, do you remember the book that Louise Hay wrote, and you could go in and you could look up an ailment and it would tell you where it was coming from. So of course, for me,
heal your life. You can heal your life.
Yes, you can heal your life. I would love to see you create something around what you just said in a book, because to me, there's more to it. There's more motivation to know that if we don't just think it, but we embody it and we do it. Like, and I've been using this a lot lately with a lot of my clients about, things happen in our lives and then we respond, and everything between that gap, it could be seconds or minutes, but it's typically only that, because we're always making a choice. But there's so much involved in that. It's like 1,000,000 miles an hour, your vibration, your thought, the story you told yourself, the thing you're about to say out loud. It determines everything in that moment for that episode or whatever it might be. And
that's why at that moment, as you're in that gap, and what I'm about to be or do or say, is it expansive or contractive? And you start to bring that lens to govern the words, govern the choice, govern the action. And if you just do that slightly more than you've ever done it, it will change everything.
And I think it motivates people. Like when you said if and when is a low vibration. I mean, I hear
that's granted. That not if and when is I will feel grateful if this happens. I will feel grateful. We're talking about gratitude. I will feel gratitude when that happens. So it's all condition based. I mean, you probably will be grateful when that happens, but I'm not going to not be grateful today. I'm not going to wait. But you hear people say, when that happens, then I'm going to really be happy. What about today?
Right. You might miss a lot of years
that's right.
Because things don't happen overnight. But
they don't mean it. They ultimately don't really even mean they don't want to be happy now. They just don't know. We just don't know.
So if someone's giving themselves permission to step out and create a new business, which a lot of women are, they're stepping into their power in this day and age. And I think it's finally, for me, what I feel so grateful for is that when I first came up with this idea to do permission, it wasn't time, because I wasn't grateful. I was still pissed and angry and passive aggressive. I had to work through my 3 or 4 years of getting to that place of grace and respect and admiration for where I'd been and for all the people that contributed to the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it made me who I am and made me now be able to laugh about, how crazy and ridiculous we can be in those moments, but they're all gifts. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm starting a new business and they say, well, when I'm ready to do that, or if I get a client, can you still say that vibration is not as high as really focusing on being so grateful that you have the knowledge to
It's not an either or. So there's a wonderful, and one of the ways I drilled this into myself is I would just doodle ampersands. On this, an ampersand is on the top of your 7 key on your computer. Mm-hmm. And just to doodle it so that because our brain is bifurcated, so we easily get into either or thinking. And if you will go to the both and, yes, I will be grateful, and I can be grateful now. And I will have what looks like more freedom over there. And what kind of freedom can I, because the vibration of freedom will bring freedom. The vibration of gap or lack will not bring freedom. The vibration of lack will bring lack. So the trick, of course, is to be at the level of vibration of the vision you're holding, even when it's not yet in form. And one of the best codes for that, actually, all over the world, and you've all heard this, there was a second revolution in the United States. The first revolution was the American Revolution to become free from Britain. The second was a revolution of thinking that occurred in the Northeast, known as transcendentalism. So transcendentalism is that there's a part of us that is transcendent to our conditions. It's the same thing we're talking about all morning here. It was the birthplace of metaphysics in the United States, not in the world. I mean, it's in all the depths of the mystical side of all the religions. It's in Egyptian and Greek philosophy. But transcendentalism then becomes where you can have a condition without the condition having you when you relate to that part of you that is more than the condition. Every one of us is more than any condition, situation, and history. We're more than our history. Our history doesn't define our destiny, except we're talking about permission, unless we give it permission to define us. So as you, the ability then to be transcendent to the things that are happening, you can do that by remembering. So Thoreau studies this with Emerson, and then he says, I want to do a living experiment with it. He said, I don't want to just talk about this stuff. I want to experience it. So he does a 2-year, 2-month, and 2-day experiment in learning how to live with laws, with life's invisible laws, he calls it. And he did this experiment in living close to his own nature and noticing and noticing and noticing. So he built a little place to live by Walden Lake on rented property from Emerson. He was to plant an orchard for Emerson in return for having this land. He wasn't a hermit. He didn't stay there for 2 years. He was actually kind of a party guy, and he was a surveyor, and he and his brother were surveyors. They surveyed Cape Cod. They surveyed Merrimack River. But he says, I went to the woods because I wanted to confront life on life's terms and not find when I came to die that I had not ever really lived. Now, he did not know that he was not going to make it to his 44th birthday, that he was going to die very young. Not one of us knows how much time we have. And so this day, to bring our best to this day. So he does this experiment. He writes, I had been at the lake only 7 days when I noticed that here I am to do this great experiment, and yet I noticed that I have taken the exact same path to the lake every morning from my morning bath. And I'm thinking, if in 7 days I'm taking the exact same path to the lake, how often am I traveling down the same well-worn paths of thinking without even noticing that I'm not carving new paths? And so then he writes in his conclusion, and this is, people all over the world know this is a great quote, and you've all heard it. Very few people know it's actually a code for how transformation occurs. He says, if one advances confidently in the direction of their dream, endeavoring to live a life you've imagined, you pass an invisible boundary. All sorts of things begin to happen that never otherwise would have occurred, and you meet with a success unexpected in common hours. New, more universal, more liberal laws begin to establish themselves around that person. The old laws are rearranged in one's favor, nevertheless. One begins to live with the license of higher order of beings. Things work in a way you can't make them work. But the beginning of this, if one advances confidently in the direction of their dream, well, you can't advance in a direction of something you haven't dreamed up. No dream can come true if you don't dream it. What would you really love your life to be like, with detail, a year from now, 3 years from now? And sometimes and people say, I don't know everything, and so they don't do anything. Well, start with what you know for sure. You want great health. Start there. All of you want a very, very successful book a year from now. What's happening by means of the release of that book and the opportunities in your business, and dream them up the way you would love them. And you always hold it, this or something better still. You're not latched onto it, but this or something better still. If one advances confidently in the direction of their dream, and here's the physics of it. You're moving in the direction of the dream. You're taking a step that day, endeavoring to live the life you've imagined. Not then, now. You can't get to the dream. You have to come from it. So if I'm the woman who has a highly successful book with invitations to speak or whatever else that means to you, and I'm doing dishes, what am I thinking while I'm doing the dishes? I'm not thinking, God, I hope this works out, and this is a lot harder than I thought. I'm not thinking those thoughts. I'm thinking, I'm so grateful. Isn't it what I love my life? And you do everything you can do to embody being the woman who's living the life you've imagined while you're doing ordinary things. It's not like, and you watch, it changes you. It changes your thinking. It changes the opportunities you see. It changes you because everything is vibration. We think the law of attraction is a powerful invisible law, and it is, but it's a secondary law. The primary law is the law of vibration. And everything moves by vibration, and power that's been given to you and me is we get to dictate the vibration we live in. Not all the conditions, but the vibration we live in, and the conditions follow.
And every time we do that, we're consciously, intentionally making a choice for us to go in that direction.
Yeah, if one advances confidently in the direction of their dream in becoming a match. Einstein said, everything is energy. It can be no other way. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and it must be yours. He says, this is not philosophy. This is physics. Same way with your television. You want that picture? Match the frequency. On the radio, match the frequency. You want to call the person you love? Match the frequency with your phone. Match the frequency, and it's yours. So we don't get what we want. We get what we are. And that we're transmitting who we are through the vibration we're operating from. So when you're doing dishes or folding laundry or driving the kids or any other thing, being the woman who is living the life you love living, who is experiencing those things, that person thinks a certain way and feels a certain way, and you embody it as best you can. And the great word there is endeavor. You don't have to do it perfectly. It's just more than less. Most of us have a vision, but then we're operating from conditions. He says, when you do that, you pass an invisible boundary. When you shift the vibration, you pass an invisible boundary, because the boundary between us and what we would love is not out there, it's in here. You pass an invisible boundary and meet with a success unexpected in common hours. What is common hour thinking? Common hour thinking is condition-based thinking. If I could just get the money, then I could. If I could just, get the guy, I could. If I could just move my conditions, then I would have. And it's condition-based. And yes, you can produce results that way, but it is a very slow, long, arduous path to really creating wonderful and exponential results. Easier to become a match. And you have you're working in harmony with how the infinite brings things into existence. If you do this, he says, and ultimately you live with the license of a higher order of beings. I have a picture of my daughter, Jenny, on the day she was 16, on the day she got her driver's license. And I use this picture in some of my presentations. The look on her face. I mean, it's this 16-year-old who holding her license up, this is power, freedom, authority. I can go places, And so you imagine having a license issued by the state in which you live for a whole level of authority of your own being. A level that it's one thing to say we live in an abundant universe, but to know it. And to see that expressed in the ways that matter to you, your ability to give what you want to give and create and share what you want to share, help who you want to help, and bring forth your work and the things that matter to you. And it's all right here for us.
That's amazing. And I love it's not either or, it's and I really want to encourage the women that I work with through this message from you, that it's not when you get there, but when you and today, as you start and you lean into that and you get on that stage, even though it's scary, and you're right, it won't be perfect, but it's not if or when. And so it kind of just brings that whole thing together at a whole new level. I mean, I honestly am going to listen to this 100 times. I'm going to put this recording on my phone, Kate, and I'm going to listen to it every day before I get out of bed. And there's a couple of things this week that I was sort of not looking forward to. And you have completely changed the paradigm for me on this. And I am so grateful that you spent this time with us and gave us this. So tell us a little bit about how we can continue to follow you and other things that you have to offer, because I know we're all going to want to show up together, whatever's next.
I think we have. Oh, well, I only do 3 public events a year. And what have we got? 9 of us here today or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. If you would want to come to this, I mean, the tickets to this, it's a 3 full day event in January. The next one's in January 25th, 6th, and 7th here in LA, the Marriott by LAX. These tickets are $1,197 each, but if you want to come as Kate and Patty's participant, I could give 10 tickets. I mean, maybe only 1 or 2 of you would want to come anyway, but I'd be happy to just give you even a VIP ticket. It's a 3-day event in the things we've talked about today. And if it's something that speaks to you, otherwise, something that I know can make easy for you to access is a gift that we're going to give you today that I was invited to give. And that's a meditation that I created, which is we call it the abundance activation meditation. It's like we're not going to activate the abundance in the universe like we're going to create it out there, but we're going to activate our own awareness of it and our own receptivity to how it flows and how it works. And that's what the meditation, it's a 10-minute guided meditation. And it just helps you both not have just a cognitive understanding, but a feeling for, how to be in harmony with this amazing, wonderful universe, infinite, that we live and move and have our being in, so that it, it can't happen to us. But everything that we experience is what happens through us. So that's a gift to you. And
thank you. That's very generous.
Thank you so much for that.
You go to marymorrissey.com/permission project.
Thank
Mary
you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now tell me that it's not during TLC.
You know what, Patty? I think it either is. I think it's the same weekend this year. That's why I don't come in January. So you won't. Yeah, I'm sorry, but come in June. You'd like to come. It's the second weekend in June. That one's in Washington, D.C.
So if there's not something public, do you have some other year-long things that you can share with us that you have to offer, or are you just doing those 3 things? If we all want to become Mary Morrissey, how do we do that?
Well, I do a Thursday night class called Brave Thinking that I take people through. It's really a master's program. You can hear these ideas and you get inspired by them, but really wiring them in is another matter. Because we have decades of patterning that it's, to really, so there was no master's program in this that I could find. So I, spent years and years and years putting together what I knew would really take someone in a year's time, an hour a week, with tools and experiences. So I do that. I do, my kind of flagship low end program is called the Dream Builder program. That's Dream Builder. So anything, I guess just go take a look at what I'm doing.
Check it out.
Yeah. So
I'm changing the dates next year for January TLC.
Yeah. Now next year we're moving Dream Builder earlier, so I'm planning to come in January of 2020.
Yay.
Yeah. So,
good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. This was by far the most fascinating. Maybe it was just perfect timing interview on the planet, I think, for me and for a lot of the women here. And I know your time is precious, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I love being with you, and I just wish every one of you just that anything that impacted you, take it, use it. But blessings on particularly your new book that's coming out. We just see it going forth, giving so many of us the new permission to really know that we can give ourselves permission, and we can give ourselves ever more so permission to be more of who we really are capable of being. So have fun with it. I'll see you next time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you. Thank you, Kate.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.